Shalom, welcome to Rivkus, a CJN podcast featuring conversations with Jews of color discussing all things Jewish. I am so pleased today. There's this British expression called chuffed, and I am so chuffed today to have Hen Mazzig here with me. He is an Israeli writer, a columnist for the Jewish Journal, a speaker, a prolific writer, has been named on all those lists, like the top 50 online pro-Israel influencers, top 50 LGBTQ plus influencers, just an amazing man. His background is Mizrahi. He does studies in that. He actually holds a bachelor's degree in Middle Eastern and Islam studies from university. He is, I don't think I can say enough. His biography is incredible. Everything from his writing to his service in the IDF, an award winner, an advocate. He is the full package. And I am so pleased to have him and go beyond my usual stalking of him on Twitter and actually have a conversation. So this is amazing. Welcome.
Thank you, Rivka. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you and joining this really important podcast.
Thanks. Well, we need to hear more voices. We need to hear our voices. And, and I'm so pleased that we do have this platform to do this. So one of the things there's so much I want to ask you. I'm almost overwhelmed that because there's so much I want to ask you. So let's start off with, just because you wrote an article about Jews of color. And so why don't we start there? Because you wrote an article for the Jewish Journal and it was entitled, "What is a Jew of Color?" So please let me know what was the push that led you to write this article, and if you want to elaborate more on it, especially around the sometimes triggering statement white Jews. So if you can just elaborate for me, that'd be great.
Yes, of course. So I didn't coin the term Jews of color. It's been used for a few years. It was actually coined by a Black Jewish woman, a writer that I'm just blanking on her name right now. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think I do, and I have completely. Is her name Shauna? Oy.
Yes.
Exactly. You're right. I had forgotten that. Thank you.
Yeah. So she wrote an amazing article. It'll come to me about how important it is for Jews of color to come together, and how and for her. When she was writing about the including Jews of color in this umbrella, she spoke about, of course, Black Jews, but also including Asian Jews and including Native American Jews and including Mizrahi Jews and Jews from the Middle East and North Africa. And I think it was so important that this article was written, and since then it gave a whole language and to people that, and tool for people that would otherwise not have it. And I think that you are in one side of racism, and you know which side you are on, and people know which side they're on, and if they're benefiting from being on one side or the other, if they have experience. And when the more I read about Jews of color, the more I realized that which side of this conversation I'm at. And those stories about that resonated with me as someone that lived in America for a few years and was stopped by police and driving in the street, and I thought this was something that only Black folks face in terms of racism from police.
Wow.
In this way. And for me it was, but I'm also, one policeman, and I wrote about that as well. It wasn't, and I'm writing about that in my next book, my first book that is coming up next year, that I just finished, that is called Mizrahi Jews of Color. And in this book, I really explored it. And I'm saying that one time I had an experience with a police officer that he looked at my passport and he said, "Oh, you're Israeli. Well, that's better. I thought you were one of those Al Qaeda people." And that was just shocking for me. But it was also, that all those experiences all of a sudden made sense for me when I read more about what Jews of color mean. And and the reason that I wrote my book in Hebrew, in English and not in Hebrew, is because it's very unique conversation to North America, I feel, in the sense that even here in the UK, and I live in the UK, it's not the same. Although there's racism, of course, there's racism here, there's racism everywhere in the West, in Europe, and in North America. But the experience is different. I think that in America, it's the history in North America, America and Canada, the history is so loaded, and there's so much to to unpack. And I do understand why a lot of Jews take issue with the idea of being called white, and I do understand that conversation that is going on right now within the Jewish community on the fact that in the Holocaust, Jews were killed because they weren't Aryan, and and that's why they were targeted. And there was this fake idea of race. But it's almost as if people are saying, some people I'm reading online and then reading some voices are saying that Jews are a race, and we're not a race. We're coming in all those
Thank you.
colors, and we're coming in all those identities. And there's a difference between celebrating diversity that I see a lot of people are doing, and which is fine, but celebrating diversity doesn't really address racism within our community and outside our community. And our community as Jews is not immune to racism. We are, of course, we are the subjected to bigotry, just like every other marginalized community. But it doesn't have to be, based on your race. And it's not even, and there's so much to discuss here. We can discuss colorism, we can discuss racism, but it's also important to understand that Jews are not a race, and that was the biggest lie, that the Nazis killed 6 million Jews because they said that we are a race. So that's why the understanding that there are Black Jews that experience both anti-Semitism and racism, and there is Jews of color that experience both racism in a different way than Black Jews, that me as a Mizrahi Jewish person would experience racism in a different way. But I can recognize that. And I think most people, we live in a world that you should know in which side of the conversation about racism you are. And understand that, you're just like being Jew is not being non-Jew, and just like being a Jewish woman is just not being a Jewish man, and just like being an LGBTQ Jew means that you're just not a straight Jew. You can be a Jew of color. That it's just, I believe that you can always add identities, and it doesn't go to say anything about anyone else, but it's just going to understand that that racism is real, and that we have suffered from it in America and wherever we have been, and some of us have benefited from it, from being, from passing into the dominated majority of society.
Absolutely. Beautifully stated. I think I've been saying till, I've almost given up saying it. When people say, we're a race, Jews are a race. I said, no. In fact, I'll never forget, somebody said to me, I said, Jews are a race. I said, that's pretty cool. I guess my children are like triracial because they're Black, white, and Jewish. So they're actually triracial. And I thought, even writing it sounded stupid, but but I was like, and there's nothing wrong with saying Jews are not a race. It's not racism, it's anti-Semitism, and owning it, and owning that there is some privilege that comes with color of skin. And, and I've tried saying to them, well, if you lived in the deep South back in the times of slavery or Jim Crow, if you walked up to a particular water fountain that said whites only, could you drink from it? And they kind of go, well, yeah. I said, I never could. I can't shed this, because then they'll say, well, at different times in history, we were considered white. And they said that you were even considered white. That should tell you something right there. I've never been considered white, And from what I understand, in the United States, Jews, there wasn't a point in history that Jews were actually considered white legally, right? But we forget all that. We get caught up in things that are, like you said, are actually inaccurate. But something else you said just led me, because as I was reading and as I was introducing you, I was thinking to myself, he has multiple identities. And as do all of us, but to see it all on paper, you have multiple identities. And one of them you touched on was you are part of the LGBTQ plus community. And I wanted to know, knowing what I know about Israel, especially Israel in a certain time, and knowing what I know about serving in the army, whether it's in Canada and US, and certain stigma and homophobia that comes with it, in particular the United States. How was your journey? How was your journey to coming out and being your whole authentic self, especially in the IDF?
It's amazing that you're asking this question, because this is a big part of my book was around how I came out of the closet as a gay person in the army when I was serving in the army, and then drawing the parallels to coming out as a person of color, as a Jewish person, as Mizrahi Jew, and really reclaiming who I am and being proud of it, and understanding that the more I am proud of who I am, and the more I am being authentic, the better. Not only it's easier for me to live as who I am, but it's also it resonates, and people see that and people react to it. And I think I came out of the closet when I was 19 years old in the army, and I was a young soldier, and coming from a house of Iraqi mother and Tunisian father that had it came from a culture that I don't want to say backward in general, but backward in terms of the acceptance of LGBTQ people. And I thought, that it might be, I mean, I knew that it's going to be difficult for them to accept it. And it was amazing that only in the army I felt that I was accepted enough. Perhaps it's because everyone wear uniform, and there's this feeling that everyone are, although not the same, but everyone are just kind of like accepted. And also the IDF is known for being accepting to LGBTQ folks, specifically for gay soldiers, but also trans soldiers now are being more accepted, which is great to see. But so I actually came out to my commander in the army, and that was the first person that I ever told him that I was gay, and he actually gave me a day off to go back to Tel Aviv because of it. And
wow.
It was a really,
he
really
was the first
experience.
one.
Yeah.
Walk me through it, because what people can't see is they can't see your smile as you're saying that. So it sounds also like, what was it in that moment? Why in that moment? Why? And why him?
There's a really cute story there, but that's why I'm smiling. I was a soldier, and later on I became an officer. But when you start as a soldier, just as a normal soldier, and I served in the West Bank in the humanitarian unit of the IDF, working with Palestinians on building infrastructure and humanitarian projects. And my commander then, his name was Adam, and Adam was really like a father figure for me in many ways, and he believed in me. And I was very heavy back then. I was probably twice my weight now. And Adam always said that that he believes that I'm going to go to officer training school. And I said, Adam, I'm not going to do it. Officer training school is a whole year that you are going through, a really difficult trainings, and you have to run. And I said, I can barely walk. You want me to run? I'm walking and I have to sit down. I'm getting tired.
Sorry.
That's what it was. And I had a friend back then at home. His name was Ilan, and Ilan was really accepted me as I am. I was in the closet back then, but I was still a fan of Britney Spears and Beyonce, and really dancing to their moves, and being very who I am and who I
hold on. So you're peeking.
Yeah.
You didn't quite open the door. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Maybe one, like the hand was out, just dancing with one hand in the air. And then and Elon was really, but he was really great. He was straight back then, and he was this macho guy that was really the straightest guy you'll meet. He was in combat unit, and he just really accepted me in every way, other than this one secret that he didn't know I was gay. And then I remember that I came back home, because you get to go back home every weekend in the Israeli army. It's not like the American or I know other armies, when they send soldiers, they're sending them thousands of miles away to Afghanistan or wherever it is, or to Iraq, or to fight for oil or democracy or whatever they need to fight for.
Like the way I love the way you put oil before democracy, but carry on.
I mean, I just like, I don't know what the story
I
is
have no
today.
complaints. I have no complaints about how you said it, but please carry on.
Whatever you want to believe in, I'm okay with that. But no, but the Israeli army, when you go to the army, you actually just drive 2 hours away to our border, and you drive after that back home in the weekend. So I went out to see Ilan, and Ilan told me that he has the secret that he hasn't told anyone, and he wants to share with me. And I said, okay, tell me. And he said, well, listen, I thought about it, and I think I'm gay. And I said, what? No way, you're the straightest guy I know. How can you be gay?
Wow.
And then he says, yes, I am. And he's taking out his phone, and he's showing me this app called Grindr, where you meet other guys on. And I'm getting upset. I didn't want to see that. I don't know why, but I was upset.
Interesting.
I mean, probably something internally. And I went back home, and I couldn't sleep that night. I went back to the army the following day, and I remember Adam being there, and he says, what's wrong? Something is happening. And I said, yeah, my best friend came out of the closet. It was very hard. And he said, why is it hard? And I said, I don't know, it's just upsetting. And he said, well, I think there's something about it that really upsets you. And I said, yeah, it's just because, it's hard for him to be gay now. And he said, no, I mean, there's something else. I said, what? And he said, well, it's because you're gay too, right?
Wow.
So not helping me out, pulling me out of the closet, basically.
Literally, that hand that was hanging out, he grabbed it and yanked you by it.
That was exactly it, yeah. And I think it was like a moment that for me, it felt like lasted forever. And he said, but that's, that's okay, Hen, you can tell me that. And I said, yeah, I think I'm gay. I said, wow, that's amazing. That's great. But there's another thing. I said, what other thing? I just came out of the closet for the first time. Can you give me a moment here? It's like typical Israeli commander. Already want to get to the next part. And he says, do you need a hug? And I'm saying, no, I don't need a hug. Leave me alone.
Wow.
He says, yeah, we had a really good relationship. And he said, okay, but the other part is that you have a crush on Ilan. That's what it is. And he was right, because I had a crush on Ilan, not even realizing it.
Wow.
So then that's why he gave me the day off, and he said, go back home, confess your love, and come back to the army the following day and tell me that you have a boyfriend. So I went back home, and I got cute and went to see Ilan. And I told him that what he did was very brave, and I wanted him to know that I think I'm gay too. And he said, what? No way, you're the straightest guy I know. You can't be gay. Same thing that I said to him. And then he's like starting to show me pictures of guys that he's going on dates with, and I'm getting like upset again.
Yeah.
And he said, what's wrong? And I said, I just want us to try and go on a date maybe. And then he really broke my heart by saying that he can't date me because now that I'm gay, there's leagues, and he can date people that are fit and good looking like him, and I can date people that are fat like me. Actually,
Excuse me?
I know, Rivka. It was really
Come on.
Heartbreaking.
Wish I had been there. I would have said, are you bleeping kidding me, dude? Like, you're brand new. What do you know who you like and who you don't like?
Exactly. You're fresh off the boat, and you're telling me all this stuff. Come on.
He's like, categorizing.
Exactly. I know. So I got back to my car, and I was my mom's car back then. I was, in tears driving home, listening to Adele. And then I went to
Adele. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm not even gonna say anything else. Continue.
You don't need to, no. Yeah. No, and then I saw Adam again, and I remember him saying to himself something like, "Oh shit," or something like that.
Yeah.
And he said, "What happened?" And I said, "You ruined my life." And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, came out of the closet, so I won't be able to go to officer training school as you wanted, because now people know I'm gay. And I also lost the love of my life. And Adam said, listen, Elon is not the love of your life, because the love of your life will never treat you this way. And that you will know that they are when they're not treating you this way. And you are going to be an officer, and I'm going to make sure of it. And we started working out together and training every night. And I lost like, I don't know, like 20 kilos in a matter of like 6 months. And I went to officer training school, and I passed, and I finished first in my battalion back then. And
Wow.
and Elon reached out to me just a few years ago, actually, after years of not hearing from him. And he said, oh, I saw some pictures of you on Instagram. Looks like you're fit now and you're working out. And I
What'd you
said,
say?
yes,
What'd
I
you say?
am. I said, yes, I am. Why? And he said, well, maybe we can go out for a drink if you're in Israel. So I sent him a picture of me and my boyfriend, Mark,
Yes.
my current boyfriend. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm playing in the big league now. And I just blocked
Yes.
him. Yeah, so no happy ending, but
No, no,
you know, I feel good about myself.
that
There is
is
happy
a
ending.
happy
There is.
ending.
It is absolutely, yes.
Like that's one of those where I want to do those 3 snaps, like, yes. Because that's what I was hoping you said. It's like, you know what? Bye. Bye-bye.
Yes,
Because
yes.
it's like bye-bye. I have always been beautiful. You just didn't see it. That's all. That's
Exactly.
all.
That's
So it
exactly it.
actually is the perfect ending. And what about your commander?
We've been in touch for a while, then we lost contact. Life is stronger than what you want. But he was really an amazing guy, and it really
Clearly.
influenced me a lot.
Clearly, like he was there at a pinnacle moment in your life. Really, he guided you through a pinnacle moment in your life. So
Absolutely.
that is an amazing man, and definitely doesn't fit the stereotype in my head of an IDF commander. The stereotypes I hear from my equal other, who is also Israeli, and to hear him talk about his commanders or whatever, it's like, oh, that doesn't sound like fun at all, at all, at all. Or I say, oh, that commander sounds like how I'd be. Stand up, sit down. So to hear this,
I had some of those as well. Yeah. Yeah, I had a few commanders in my service, and yeah, Adam was really the best one.
He sounds amazing. So kudos to
Yeah.
Adam. What a guy.
Yeah.
So so you mentioned that you were a humanitarian IDF soldier, and
right.
I didn't know there was something like that. It was because it's used as kind of a like part of the title, as opposed to you were a humanitarian guy. You know what I'm saying? So there's a humanitarian officer. That's the title.
Yeah, there's a humanitarian unit in the Israeli army. Since Israel still controls the West Bank and the soldiers are still there, there's a lot of civil aspect to take care of. So there's the COGAT unit, the Coordinator of Government Activities in the Territories, and it's basically a big unit that the soldiers and officers in the different bases, there's 9 bases for each big Palestinian city, and we coordinate everything from infrastructure and humanitarian needs. And my job was to work with the international organizations on projects like hospitals and roads rehabilitation or rebuilding of roads. And actually during my service, I remember that the American army would have sent soldiers to my base to learn how we are working with the civilian population, and then they actually copied us and started their own unit, which is great. It's really important. But it's it's very was an amazing opportunity to work with, I'm the son of refugees too, so to work with Palestinian refugees and work with on civil aspect, that was really meaningful for me.
Interesting. So you were in the thick of it, so to speak. So, you know, when you hear things or when you read things or see things, whatever, on social media, you have a very unique perspective that people like me on the outside looking in wouldn't have. You know, the closest I ever came to even anything remotely like that, and it's so not even close, is when I tell people I've been to Hebron, and they just kind of look at me like, why? Actually, that's what Israelis say to me. Why? And it's followed by, what is wrong with you? But that's the closest I ever, wandering around in Hebron and the Casbah and stuff. So that's, like I said, that's still nothing compared to being in the thick of it. So what sort of things do you hear that people say that is the exact opposite of what happens on the ground? Can you think of anything?
Well, a lot of things. I served in Hebron for like 18 months, and I always heard on how the IDF is, targeting civilians, and I can tell you the IDF is not targeting civilians. There are civilians that are being hurt in this conflict, and we can't ignore it. And my work was often to be in touch with those, with the Red Cross and the UN and all those organizations that whenever they send a complaint, they would forward it to me, and I would have to deal with it with the units. And it's really a unique place to be in when you work for the humanitarian unit, because really everyone hates you. Like,
I was going to ask you that, actually, on both sides, or
on every side. We work with the settlement community there that all of them really disliked that I was this Israeli officer that was helping the Palestinians. The Palestinians, although I helped them, and a lot of them, when they needed me, they called me, but otherwise they didn't want me to be there to begin with. They didn't want to ask me for help. International organizations also didn't think that I should have been there, and even the combat soldiers in the Israeli army that I was that I was working with didn't like the fact that they called me a snitch for going around and telling their commanders about about the Geneva Convention and running up to them with rules of engagement and what they can and cannot do. And they just wanted to do security. That's what their job was to do. But my job was to make sure that they are upholding human rights and are not violating international law. So it was very unique place to be in. And it's just, it's what people think is that Israel is like covering up or like hiding things. But the West Bank has the highest amount of journalists per capita anywhere. There's so many journalists, international journalists, so many international organizations. We saw in the war in Gaza when Israel had to take down this building that was a media building. They gave them a notice of like 24 hours. Like other places, they wouldn't give them notice. If they wanted to take down a building and take down the journalists, they would do it. But they gave them a notice. Everyone were evacuated. No one was killed. There's this joke that there's a guy that is walking down the street in the middle of the night and is seeing another person trying to look for something on the ground, and he says, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I lost my key. I'm trying to find it, my key to get back home." And the other guy is saying, "Okay, I'll help you. Tell me where you lost it." And he said, "Well, I actually lost it over there, but the light here is so much better that I'm looking here." And that's basically Israel. Like, because the light is so good, like people are constantly looking at it instead of looking in places that are far more darker than Israel.
Exactly.
So it's not to say that it's perfect, but yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And even what you said, I remember wandering around Hebron, and you definitely did not feel alone. There was a lot of journalists. In fact, some were yelling at me. And I probably did somewhat of a rude gesture back. In fact, I know I did. I'm not going to fake it. I did, because I felt harassed. But but really and truly, all eyes on Israel. All eyes on Israel. Very few eyes on other places, including the places where some of our biggest detractors come from. Or some of our not so big detractors. Like, I love it when, my fellow Canadians or Americans have things to say about Israel because, they've never been there, for starters, but they still have loads to say about Israel. And I think to myself, clean your own backyard first. Pay attention to your own backyard first. United States, pay attention, definitely clean your own house, because as it stands today, and I'll say this openly, I have no interest in going there because I am a Black person. I have no interest in going there because I don't feel particularly safe. In Canada, a little more safe, but look at how we treat our Indigenous people. We treat them like less than. So we need to clean our own house before we even criticize a house. It's a lot cleaner than ours, actually. a lot
Mhm.
cleaner. So I
Mhm.
hear you. I hear you.
This is such an important point, what you said, that I mean, I had this debate with Ariel Gold. She's the founder of Code Pink, an anti-Israel organization, and she
I
lives
know
in
who she
Ithaca.
is.
Oh, okay, you know who she is.
Hmm.
um, okay, so you know what I'm talking about. But she told
Hmm.
me something like, "You need to go back to where you came from." And I
Mm.
said, "Girl, you live on a stolen land. You literally live in Ithaca, which is a burial site for Native Americans, and you're telling me to go back to where I came from? Where did you come from?" And she said that she's Jewish and her family came to the US from Spain. They originated from Spain because she's Sephardi. And I said, but
Hmm.
they didn't originate from Spain. They lived in Spain. They were expelled from Spain. But
Exactly.
where did they came from originally? Like where did they started as people? Because indigeneity is not about where your grandparents come from or your great grandparents. It's where you started as a people, which
The
land you
roots,
belong
the
to.
absolute
Yeah,
roots of the people.
like
Hmm.
exactly. That's like trying to change the conversation to say that Native Americans don't deserve the autonomy in their land. And I think that's why it's so ridiculous that people in America are the ones that are telling people in Israel that they need to leave their land, or people in Canada telling Israelis that they are committing genocide against indigenous people. The Jews in Judea are doing it, or saying that, or British people talking to us about colonialism and imperialism,
But they're
and
the biggest
Europeans.
ones.
Yeah, like come on, give me a break. Or
It's
in
the hypocrisy is real.
Mhm.
The,
Absolutely.
and including among our very own Jewish people, the
Right.
hypocrisy is real, which is often why I said to you before we started, I used to be on Twitter like crazy. In fact, I didn't confess this to you, but I was actually a bit obsessive on Twitter. Like I was the 3 a.m. tweeter. But, anyways, but in all seriousness, I got fed up because I was like, if you can't see the facts in front of you that in this case are pretty black and white, and you're still going to carry on this absolutely false narrative, I can't fix you. And nor do I want to even attempt to even bother, because it's just wearing me out
Hmm.
as you sit on land stolen
Yeah.
that actually was stolen factually. It's very frustrating. So I
Yeah.
hear you. I hear
Yeah.
you. Let's talk about Mizrahim. Let's talk
Hmm.
about Mizrahim and Israel. And I'll preface it by saying it is something that people, I am saddened actually how little we call ourselves the people of the book, right? That's what we call ourselves, people of the book. But I'm so saddened about how little our own people know about the history of Mizrahim or Sephardim in the Middle East, in Israel, and the long, unbroken history in the land. And the narrative has been spun as, the state of Israel was formed in 19 whatever and not re-established. The narrative of Israel is there because of escaping from the Holocaust in Europe, and almost wiping out the unbroken presence of those of us who never left the area, never left, and held it down so that there was some place to come back to. Right. So you share your thoughts. You've done a lot of research behind this. It's your story.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the name of the author that I mentioned earlier, her name is Shauna McKinney Bolden, and
Of
she's
course.
yeah, she's incredible, and she coined the term Jews of color, and
That's
she actually
right.
said, I found the quote that this collection of writing she wrote the first time that anyone, I mean, that we, at least that I know of, ever wrote about it, was in Bridge, a journal for Jewish feminists and our friends, that published an issue that was titled "Writing and Art by and for Jewish Women of Color." And she
Okay.
said that this collection of writing and artwork by Jewish women of color, Jewish women of African, Asian, Latin, and Native American heritage, offers readers a chance to think about racism within the Jewish community. And that was really, she said, how we name ourselves and our experiences is the place to begin. And she invited this group of diverse group of women, Jewish women,
Okay.
to speak about being Jewish women of color, which is, I think, it's
Wow.
beautiful
That's
way to,
powerful. So my
yeah.
apologies to Shauna for not blanking out on her name because I shouldn't have. And maybe I need to bring her on and to apologize in person. But nonetheless, thank you. Thank you for jogging it for me.
No,
That's
no,
incredible.
I blank on that as well. But yeah, it's an incredible idea, and I think to include Mizrahim within that is so important because Mizrahi Jews, as you said, have been in the Middle East for the, perhaps it is the strongest evidence of Jewish connection to the Middle East. My family has lived in Iraq before it was even Iraq. We look at the Middle East today and we forget that all those countries weren't there for a long time. It's all new creation and new borders that have been drawn because of colonialism, because of imperialism from the West, but also Arab colonialism. And that's another thing that we forget, that
We don't talk about that,
mm,
but we need to. But
we
continue.
absolutely need to, because being imperialist doesn't only come in white, it comes in different colors as well. And Arab imperialism has been dominating the Middle East for the longest time. The reason that my family, the Jews of Iraq and Jews in Tunisia and Jews in other places, were called Dhimmi, which means protected minority, was because they lived under Arab rule and they weren't Muslim. If they wanted to become Arabs, they had to convert to Islam, but they were constantly reminded that they are not Muslim and that they are not Arabs. They had to pay tax to be Jewish. They couldn't ride a horse that was higher. They couldn't ride a horse at all. They couldn't be higher than a Muslim person.
Wow.
They couldn't even have the same position as Muslims. I mean, my great grandfather was working in the court in Iraq, and he had the education of a lawyer, but he couldn't be a lawyer because you weren't allowed to be a lawyer as a Jewish person. It was Islamic law, so it only was Islamic. The only Muslim lawyers were allowed to practice law. And he later on was executed for being Jewish by the Iraqi government. And all of this, people, especially in the West, have a problem of realizing that Arab imperialism is what really was the dominant force that oppressed minorities and still oppress minorities in the Middle East. And the best test to recognize an empire is by language. The reason that I speak English is because English is an imperial language, and the same reason that French is spoken in so many places, and Spanish is spoken in so many places, and Arabic is spoken in so many places. If there's several countries that speak a language, you understand that it's that the reason for it is because of imperialism, because that's how empires extend their force and their control, and they re-educate or force the local community to adhere to their culture and then erasing their own the indigenous community's culture.
100%.
Israel is the only place that people speak Hebrew at. I mean, of course, we have minority communities of Jews around the world that speak Hebrew, but not the same way. The only country that its official language is Hebrew is in Israel. Israel is a nation state, while the Arab world is an empire. And Mizrahi Jews have lived in this region for thousands of years. We know that in history, it used to be that the Jews of the Middle East were the ones that the whole world looked to. And people like Maimonides, the Rambam, was writing all the Jewish texts and all the halacha that we're following today, all the practice that we're following. He wrote it in Iraq, in Babylon. Even Iraqi Jews are identifying today as Babylonian Jews rather than Iraqi. Of course, some of them go by Iraqi Jews, but they remember that they were there before it was Iraq, when it was Babylon. And they remember that on the rivers of Babylon, we sat and cried. That refers to Iraqi Jews when they were sitting and crying and remembering Zion and wanting to go back to their homeland. So that's the story of my family, but it's also the story of so many Jews that have lived in this region and have this strong connection to the land. And this is where we started. This is where they maintain their identity. But although they've been in closer proximity to the land of Israel, they weren't in the land of Israel. And for them, they were still in the diaspora, and they still long to return to their homeland. And what's interesting is that while Jews in Europe in recent time, right before the Holocaust, they received emancipation in Europe. They were told that that they are equal citizens, that you read texts of Jews saying that before the Holocaust, saying I'm German before I'm Jewish,
Yes.
thinking that they would be protected,
Hmm.
and if they just give up their Jewish identity, they would be accepted. Of course, we know how terrible the
How that
story
ended.
ended.
Yep.
Yeah. But meanwhile, while that was the experience of Jews from Europe, I mean, Jews in the Middle East and North Africa were always oppressed as a collective. And I think that's the biggest difference that we have between the experience of Mizrahi Jews and Jews from Europe, Jews that lived in Europe. I'm being very careful with the semantics because I do understand some people are a bit sensitive to this,
Yes.
to the wording. But Mizrahi Jews in the Middle East and North Africa, and also actually Jews in Ethiopia as well. They were also always and Jews in other countries in Africa, because there are many Jewish communities in Africa, although we don't hear a lot about them. But
Right.
Beta Israel is probably one that, because they're now in Israel, we hear so much about them. But I think
Yes.
it's really important that we bring back or allow Jews from Rwanda and Jews from anywhere else in
Absolutely.
Africa
The
to,
Ibu Jews, the Lemba
yes,
Jews. Yeah.
all
100%.
of them are
Hmm.
should be brought back and or allowed to go back if they want
Hmm.
to Israel. It's an issue that I really care about, and I work behind the scene with politicians, and I've been pushing for it for years.
Oh,
And
wow.
I know that it's just a process. Yeah,
Hmm.
but it's something that we have to fix. But those communities, all of them always were oppressed as a community. They always knew that they were together, and I think that this is why many Mizrahi Jews in Israel today are more nationalistic in a way that they are, very right wing, and they vote for the Likud party. And while they are very progressive on many issues, like they would accept, my family now accepts me as a gay person. They actually fight for gay rights, which I never imagined that my mom would be person to do that. But
That's
when
cool.
it's when someone in your family is like that, for them, for Mizrahim,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. I have a friend that she's a trans woman, and her parents are Yemenite Jews that are ultra Orthodox, and they accept her, and they say, we don't care about what the world thinks. This is our daughter, and we
That's
love
our
her.
daughter.
And that's really, I think, this is very Middle Eastern African type of culture, that it's very, the family comes above everything, and there's nothing like cutting off the family members. And you can be so upset about your uncle or your aunt, but they're still, and
Still
maybe
their
it's also
family.
this, absolutely. And maybe it's also this uniqueness that I'm hearing a lot of people saying, I'm coming to Israel, and there's this like different experience, and there's flavors, and there's smells, and there's this feeling of a family. And I think that the biggest difference about Israel, like why Israel is like that, is because of Mizrahi Jews. It's because 60% of Israeli Jews today are Jews that are descendants, the first, second, and third generation of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa, because we were oppressed as a community, as a family. We came to Israel as family, as a community. And I feel like in Europe, they were oppressed individually, and
Hmm.
the horrific catastrophe in the Holocaust was also part of why individuals were, Jewish women could have wake up without their kids, or having their kids shot in front of their eyes, and there was a horrific violence that happened there. But that also got them to think twice about what family means and how emotionally you are connected to a family. And I'm sure it does. Some generation. I'm not an anthropologist, but I'm sure that it does something with generational trauma that
Yeah,
passes on.
I believe it
Um,
does.
yeah. So that's like, I think, is a big difference. This is what being Mizrahi means to me. It's
Oh, wow.
this being part of a family and being part of togetherness, that I think all Jews should be like that, by the way.
Yeah.
And many are. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's also this, I think when I think of Israel, and I say to people, first of all, it's important to hear, because there is this narrative around Israel and what the dominant cultural group is. And so I think it's important for people to hear that the majority, because I've always felt that way, but I always kind of felt like I was talking to myself, but I always said more Jews are not Ashkenazi in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, well, I said, it may feel that it's not the case. And I said, often because your contact with Israel may be specific to, because I won't deny this, may be specific to going to a particular Mizrah and you see who's behind the desk. So you assume that represents all of Israel. And I said, that's not the case. And I also said, there should be, this might be controversial, maybe, may not be. And I've always said, we should flip the government a bit and we should have more Mizrahim there. Because if anybody knows what it's like to live in the Middle East, deal with the Middle East, know the Middle East, everything, it is Mizrahim, right? And I said, I bet you things would be a little different, because I think we, Israel, has imported concepts from the diaspora that you can't just apply to a country that's inherently Middle Eastern in its thinking and its philosophy. And I think that's where we're having our problems.
Absolutely. You are so spot on. The part that we are not immune to phenomena that we have lived in the diaspora. You know, we adopt and we take a lot of things from the diaspora. The reason that I cook kube and that I speak Arabic and that all of this comes from my family, because this is what they've done in the diaspora. And the same way that you are influenced by culture, you're also influenced by the negative things in society, and we have to realize that. And when you lived in Europe, and Europe is where racism was spread through the world, thinking that people with brighter skin color are preferable than people that with a darker skin color, that's European concept. And Jews were not immune to that, and we have been affected by it. While there's nowhere in Jewish text, and I've looked into it, there's nowhere in Jewish text ever that there's something that says that your skin color says how better you are or how worse you are. There's no reference to it, and there's no reason to think that Jews have ever been all the Jewish leader and all the Jewish philosopher and all the Jewish people that we've, you know, the stories, the Bible stories, that any of them had a white skin. There's no reason to believe that. But we were definitely affected by the communities that we lived in, and we need to recognize that Jews in Europe were actually, you know, were affected by those ideas that they lived around. And you said it's, you know, that I have those numbers here. I was just looking for it for my book, that in the last 20 years, there was 20% Mizrahi ministers and 80% Ashkenazi ministers in the Israeli government. So, and that's a country of, as I said, there's 60% of Israeli Jews are Mizrahim. So there's a majority of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa, and yet only 20% of them are in the Knesset. And it's the same with women in the Israeli government. We have to work on that, because in the last 20 years, there's only been 11% of women in the Israeli government compared to 89% ministers in the Israeli government. So these are things that we have to work on. But
absolutely, it has to be representative. And I mean, it's a challenge for almost every country, but we can always do better, you know, and we should do better. And the government should be a representation of the people.
And those numbers gives you the impression that as if there's white Ashkenazi men that prevent from Mizrahim and women to be more represented. So there is every reason to believe that this is a problem that we have to address. And we need to also address the fact that in academia in Israel, the Mizrahim are underrepresented. There's more representation in Israeli academia to scholars from Arab Israelis than there is of Mizrahi Israelis. So, you know, the minority, the 20% of Israeli Arabs have more representation in academia than there is for Mizrahi Jews. There's never been a president of any university in Israel that is Mizrahi. There was one that was half Iraqi, I think, just recently, that was nominated, but other than him, never Mizrahim represented. The same with, you know, when we're looking at wealth and where Mizrahim are standing in terms of the salaries, there's still a 30% wage gap between second and third generation Mizrahi Jews in Israel than there is to Ashkenazim. So all these things, and people always tell me, oh, you know, statistics, you can take it wherever you want. I don't think so. No. Not when you're talking about a majority of the population that is still feeling underrepresented, that there wasn't a Mizrahi prime minister ever there. We're still, you know, we're feeling it. You can't tell us that people shouldn't be even gaslight us to thinking that crazy because we're not.
No, you're spot on. And it's funny because I do this program with Federation called Café à Fou, where do you know what Café à Fou?
It sounds familiar.
Oh, it's super cool. I've been doing it since it started. So initially, I did it with I was in it with high school students from Sderot and Eilat, and what it is so that they can work on their English. So I spend my time just talking to them on topics of Jewish identity and so on, but they get to work on their English because it's all in English. And thank God, because my Hebrew is horrible. But so now it's university students this time round, and I believe they're out of Sapir College. So fantastic. But the last group I shouldn't say but, and the last group that I had there were two young ladies. One, her background is Karaite, which is an interesting minority within Israel. And the other young lady, from Yemen. But it led us to speak about, who are the minorities, who are the perceived minorities, right? Because that is different. Because you just said it, Mizrahim are the perceived minority, but are actually not the minority, right? And so we talked about that, and we talked about the feeling that, one of them said, I have this last name. And, in Israel, it feels like if my last name was Adler, it'd be better than what my last name is. And it was actually really sad to hear. It kind of hurt your heart. So those people who say statistics, blah, 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 I'm sorry, anecdotally on the ground, the statistics, anecdotally on the ground, what you're saying bears out. It's truth. It's Emet.
Absolutely. And the a former minister, Miri Regev, she's a former minister for Likud, and I really disagree with a lot of her politics on different issues, and that's okay. But she's a Mizrahi woman, and she gave an interview recently that shocked the country just a few weeks ago. Now she's in the opposition, and she said that we need to stop voting for quote unquote leaders with white DNA, and we need to vote for Mizrahi Jews to lead, and maybe a Mizrahi woman should lead. And she actually she was born by the name Siboni, and she changed it to last name Regev because Regev is more Ashkenazi. And she was challenging that, and she said that this is the biggest regret she has in her life, that she had to adhere. And she said, and I think I really like the part where she says, you need to ask yourself not why I changed, but I mean,
not that I changed it.
Right. But why I changed it.
Exactly.
And it's true. Like if the idea that she even need to be challenged for changing her name, she needed to do it. And she also said, which was another part that I love, that she recalled how she saw that when Obama was elected, she was sitting in front of the TV and crying for a whole hour because she felt so connected to the experience of many African Americans, not because she said it's not because we had slavery in Israel, of course not, but it's this. There's a lot of similarities in how we're feeling in Israel to this feeling of many in the African American community and the racism that they're still experiencing in society.
Which is something Israel. This is not, sadly, that feeling is not new to Israel, or else there wouldn't have been the Black Panthers of Israel.
Right.
Right. And
Absolutely.
we still have a long way to go, even in Israel, the country I love. And hopefully no one can hear me. I'll just say as much as Canada. Okay. I love Israel. It's like I feel whenever I'm there, it feels like home. Wow. Well, thank you. I would love to continue this conversation with you at some point in the future, if you're amenable to that, because there are so many other things I would love for you to speak about and your experience. And you said you're doing a book. It's almost done. So
yeah, almost done.
Maybe
Next
around the time. Okay, no, I want before that, but but we can talk about what's in your book, because I'm hoping I get an advanced free copy.
signed and delivered for free. Yes,
Done.
absolutely.
I'll tell you what, you said you're in England now, but when you're in Israel, I'll come to Israel to visit. Not that I have anything against England. I've been to England. My relatives in England, but my heart's in Israel. So
mine is too. I'm here just because my partner is English, but we're going to move back one day. So yeah, I would love to come back to speak with you soon and to following that up. And what you said, I love Israel, and I feel that absolutely. If I didn't love Israel, I wouldn't do this work every day, and I wouldn't be, even when I'm criticizing Israel. If I didn't love Israel, I wouldn't care. I would say whatever, like they can. I want
like
Israel
family.
to be. Yeah, exactly. We spoke about that. That's the value that leads me, and I think leads you as well.
Absolutely. I say to people when the same conversation about criticizing. So if I didn't care, it wouldn't even be a thought. It wouldn't even come out of my mouth. It's because I care. It's because I care. And, and that's what you do with family. Sometimes you see family acting up, you check them. You check them because you love them. And that's it. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is a highlight for me. So thank you. And one day we shall meet, continue the conversation as a podcast, and just continue the conversation, period.
Can't wait to meet you one day. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. And you take care. I know you're a very busy person. But thank you for joining. Thank you for joining us, Hen. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. I enjoyed it a lot.
Thanks for listening to Rivkush. Our producer is Michael Freeman, music by Westside Ravy, and I am Rivka Campbell. Check out the CJN's new website. Go to thecjn.ca/Rivkush. Listen and subscribe. Thank you for listening.
It's time we talk about more than just the tragedy, the hardships we've overcome and the savagery. It's time we focus on what's woven in the tapestry, the roots that connect us to our truth and the canopy of every single branch of our tradition. The story that's been told and those yet to be written. A tale of persistence, an account of achievement. All across the globe, every single place that them leaves went. Scattered in the wind, never scattered too thin. To remember where we come from and the goal that's within. Zahav Yerushalayim, Asur Lishkoach, Hakdushat Haaretz, Shenoten Lanu Koach. Scattered in the wind, never scattered too thin. To remember where we come from and the goal that's within.